everyone. Can y'all hear me? Just gonna tilt this a little bit so you can see my swatches. Hello. All right, okay. Can everyone hear me, by the way? I always have backup headphones. Because let's see. Did you get them? Hello, everyone. Hi. Oh, great. Fantastic. There we are. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm so relieved that I'm here. This was the most stressful part, was just whether or not I was going to be able to enter.
Make it. You've done the hard part. The hard part was using technology to get it to work. I do this enough that I still feel that. It's just something about the format that you're like, anything could happen.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you for doing this and having me. And it's nice to meet you.
It is so lovely to meet you. I feel like I'm going to do that thing that all people from Southern California do, which is, how is the weather? How are you holding out with all the rain?
It's raining.
Apologies to the rest of the country, but there's moisture falling from the air and we just don't know what to do.
I mean, it's unbelievable. It just keeps going.
It doesn't stop. Yeah, that's the weird part.
Yeah, it's not usual. The trees are happy.
Yes, the trees are very happy, and my allergies are going nuts as well. Just all of the tree pollen. Yeah. It's so if you see me cough or clear my throat, it's just a fun allergy moment that we're having. All right, I am so thrilled to have you here with us today, and I am so thrilled to talk about your book, In Every Life. So we'll pull it up. I know it's going to be reversed when I do this for everyone, but it's a beautiful book. I love that it fits in the frame perfectly. Marla, and is it Frazee? Am I saying that correctly? Frazee, thank you. Marla Frazee, and this is where I read the official bio, so I'll look off, was awarded a Caldecott honor for All of the World and A Couple of Boys Have the Best Week Ever, and the Boston Globe Horn Book Award for picture books for The Farmer and the Clown, which, by the way, what an incredible title.
I know, it goes on.
She's the author illustrator of Roller Coaster, Walk On, Santa Claus and the World's #1 Toy Expert, The Boss Baby, and Boot and Shoe, as well as the illustrator of many other books, including The 7 Silly Eaters, which feels like it should be on my epitaph, Stars, and the New York Times bestselling Clementine series, and God Got a Dog. So welcome, Marla, and thank you for being with us today. Yeah, I am just so thrilled. So first of all, I get to pick all the books, which is my favorite thing. And I am a big lover of picture books, even though I write YA, because I love the visual language within them. And you're the author and the illustrator. And could you talk about, actually, let's pause for a second. Could you talk about the guiding light for this book for you for a second? What inspired you to write In Every Life? Because I loved your bit at the beginning of your book talking about it.
I mean, it's a story that goes back to 1998.
Wow.
And at the time, we were attending, my family, All Saints Church in Pasadena, and we were in and I have 3 sons, and they were all either acolyting or in the choir, and so we were very active. And during a service, there was this call and response blessing that was read. The minister would say one part, and then the congregation would say the other part. And as it was going on, it was the first time I heard it, I was thinking, that's a picture book. I could just I had that feeling, that's a picture book. And it said underneath it that it was a Jewish blessing, part of the Brit Milah, which is the naming ceremony.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to try and figure out the source of this. So at the time I was working with Linda Zuckerman, who is the editor of the 7 Silly Eaters. My
Your titles are just off the charts.
she was my first and at the time the only editor I'd worked with. And I sent it to her. I either Xerox, I'm not sure, but in those days, how I transmitted this information.
I remember the Xerox days. I had the tail end of them when I started work. Like I was just at the overlap when we started really emailing.
I know, it's so weird to think.
I remember what carbon copies looked like. I'm probably one of the last to remember. But...
Do you remember the fax machine that would scroll out upside down? Yeah.
And because I was allowed when I was in an office to, especially as a kid, if you went to your parents' office, you could pull the bindings off. Like that was really thrilling to like take off the crimps. Yeah, and then that was a whole plot point in a movie, right? Wasn't that like in The Firm where the paper rolls under because it's like a scrolly, the fax doesn't get received.
And it just sort of like, I mean, we could keep going down this road because I remember answering machines and saying, I am not doing that. No way. So the fact that I'm on an Instagram live right now, this is progress. Yeah, this is really something.
So you anyway, your first editor at the time, the idea.
And she thought it was intriguing enough to like, yeah, let's figure out where this prayer came from. And so we started to investigate and talk to a lot of Jewish scholars, the American Jewish University. Like I wrote to Anita Diamond, and she had included it in her new Jewish baby book. I can't get the title right now, but she had a collection of Jewish prayers for babies. Yeah, and it was in there like a version, and everywhere we kept hearing like, no one knows where this came from. Like it's not really part of it seems like it maybe emerged during the 80s. It wasn't like, a traditional, and one of my notes on all these reams of papers I have, it says in pencil, I must have been on the phone with somebody, it might be some woman on vacation in Florida.
Who just invented a whole prayer?
Yeah,
that is like basically
on vacation in Florida.
That's basically been canonized at this point. Right. This type of prayer.
Yeah. So it looked like it was, I was free to adapt it, and revise it, and which was good because in its original version, there were words that would be hard for a picture book, and my and some of them were actually saying the same thing, Right. To me. So anyway, for all these years, I mean, it's been gone from various places. Like Linda acquired it at Harcourt, but then she left Harcourt and the field, and then the publisher at the time kind of didn't think it was appropriate for me to illustrate because my work was funny and lighter and not really like in tune with this particular manuscript. And she also felt that it was maybe an adult book and I wasn't the right person to illustrate something that was an adult. I just didn't have a sophisticated enough voice as an illustrator. So I took it to another, Linda and I, for a while, she was sort of in a freelance editor capacity. Mm-hmm. It kind of traveled around for a lot of years. So and
I mean, if you had the idea in '98 and you've been researching since then, it's quite a time.
It traveled around, and a lot of the responses from different houses were similar. Like it would kind of go through the acquisition process and almost be acquired. Some cases it was under contract in 2 other houses for quite a while. And often the feeling in-house was like the same. It was kind of like, well, your work is sort of funny and light and this isn't, or this is a very religious text and who's going to buy it? And this was like sometimes during those eras of like the chain publishing was just leading, more of a mass market kind of stuff. I mean, so publishing was also going through its different,
I mean, it was going through the growing
incarnations.
pains, of
Yeah.
earlier. It's going through growing pains again, I feel like, as a business
Yeah.
model. But yeah, that was definitely like a whole era of, if we can't stock it in the chains and we don't immediately know where to shelve it, sorry, you're out of luck. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right. And this was a hard sell. That was the era too. There was that whole time, maybe not that exact era, but for a long time it's like, where are all the quiet books? I think my work is too quiet. And so there were a lot of different feelings about it. Meanwhile, I couldn't figure it out anyway. Like, it would be when it was under contract, I could talk about it. I could say what I thought this book should be, but I never quite figured out, there's something about a picture book, like you kind of, at least for me, it's like the form of a picture book is so important.
Yeah.
And I have to be able to see it in order for me to start drawing it.
Yeah.
And that includes like the size, the shape, the length, everything. And I couldn't really ever see this exactly enough to start drawing it. So I never really did. And at one point, my agent, who's Steve Malk, and I've worked with him for a long time, and he's incredible. He had sort of, first of all, I was sort of shepherding around, and then when I started working with him, he was involved with a lot of the moving it back and forth from various houses. And he was like, maybe you should be the author and have someone illustrate it. And he gave me the name of a very incredible, well-known, wonderful illustrator. And I was like, no.
Like, you're like, I respect him so much, this is mine. Yeah, you're like, I know, I have to solve it. I haven't solved it, but it has to be me that solves it. Yeah, no, I get that.
and that response was so
like full body,
visceral.
Full body. It was a full body no.
And I remember talking
go down with this ship than hand it over. I'll say
exactly.
I'm James Cameron. I'm gonna go look for the Titanic. I don't care what you say to me.
Yeah,
I know it's not.
It just sits in a drawer. No, I mean,
I respect it. No, I do.
I called Linda, who, I'm still friends with Linda Zuckerman. She's wonderful. And I'd fill her in on what was happening with this. And she'd be like, so you're not going to do it? Even you said no, like you want it, like it's almost, what are you proving here? And she had I thought it was an Aesop's fable that I then tried to figure out which one she sort of said it was similar to, and it wasn't a real, great compliment of my character. And so I was thinking, well, am I being really stubborn? Should I? But it was just like, no. I mean, I felt like I was one day going to be able to figure this out.
Yep. No. You knew. Yeah.
In some weird place, I guess I did.
I love that a book that has so much faith and interfaith in it, you had to have this much faith in it. Like the meta story of that is really beautiful.
It's funny to think about it. It really is. So then fast forward to the pandemic.
Yeah.
The beginning of the pandemic. Well, sort of. I had finished The Great Zapfino, and then I had brought out this book that, and The Great Zapfino was so fun to work on. That was by Mac Barnett, and it was, I was working on that, and then I soon afterward took out a book of my own that it's funny. It's supposed to be a funny book, and I couldn't be funny. I was grounding this book into the dirt. It was just like I couldn't do it, and I was so frustrated, and decided like maybe it's time for this blessing. Maybe this is the right time, and I brought it out. And it was like reams of paper, and I went through it really carefully, read everything. And I was kind of thinking like a lot of the notes and a lot of the, from other houses and from editors who were sort of involved at some points. And Alan Johnston was involved back and forth throughout the whole thing. Like it would kind of come and go out of out of her, you know, she was at Harcourt when it first got there, and then we took it to Simon and Schuster when she started Beach Lane.
Yeah,
so kind of traveled
you
around.
moved with her, yeah.
Right. So she and sometimes
an adventure, an unexpected journey.
And there were many times that, you know, she was maybe at my kitchen table and she'd be like, well, let's bring that thing out, and we'd look at it again, and so her notes are all over it. And as I was reading them all, I thought, you know, times have changed. Like, this has gone through eras of publishing that are no longer, you know, and I felt like publishing, especially picture books, over the years, to me, have just broadened and deepened so much that they encompass, which is great, all kinds of things that in the past, like what we were talking about with like chain bookstores and stuff, it was kind of like, and it
was like, oh,
like
you're a picture book author and you write funny books. That's all you're gonna write, and we know where to shelve that, and we understand how to sell that to a parent to read to a kid, rather than like, hey, kids can understand like big feelings, or, you know, ideas about faith in simple words, or the idea that you could be able to be both comedic and philosophical, which is, you know, who knew?
Right, which is so great. I mean, I do feel like these are, I mean, I think we're seeing books now that, you know, are just incredibly rich because of this. So it felt like this might be the time. And I talked to Alan, and she was like, yeah, I think you might be right. Like, you know, maybe it's the time. And so it was sort of like the end of 2020, maybe like late in the year, that I kind of thought, this is what I'm going to work on next. Let's see if I can finally do it. And I remember my youngest son, James, was staying in the house at the time. He's in school in Chicago, and he's in graduate program, writing his dissertation in U.S. history. So he's very cerebral. I don't know how this happened in an art family, you know, but he's the outlier in our family. So
I love the idea that in art, like the outlier in a family of artists is like a historian.
No, it's kind of like, how'd that happen? Sometimes he says, like, why didn't you guys tell me X, Y, or Z? I'm like, we had no idea. Like, we don't know anything about this.
We didn't know, honey. I'm so sorry, we didn't know.
So he was here in town, which was delightful. And he and I were both sort of doing our jobs. You know, he was writing his stuff.
I like that you're both still doing similar jobs, though, where you're both like researching, looking through your notes, and like generating words just in two really different lanes too. Like, I love that. Yeah, I'm actually very visual, so like the movie of that, of both of you at like a big table, like working on radically different ideas, is super fun. Yeah, it's like you can see the core of what you gave him, even though he took it in a very different direction.
Yeah, I mean, he was a great help during this time for me too, because we would take these sort of late afternoon pandemic walks, and he'd be like, you know, we'd ask each other what we were doing, what was going on, and he'd say, so where are you with the text? Because that's what I was still trying to nail down, the text. Yeah. And so I would read it, and he'd be like, aren't those tropes? That was one day I remember. Like, I was like, oh no. He's like, aren't they just sort of saying the same thing? Or, you know, isn't it a little treacly? I don't know. He would, not great. You know, I'm like, no, like when it's illustrated, it'll be different. You know, I was so whiny. And
you don't see my vision. Don't I need to explain my art to you.
And it was one day, I'm probably jumping ahead, but okay, so one day, I'm going to stay with this story. We were walking, and he asked me, and I recited the 7 lines as they are in the book. And there were 8, and so they had changed in order, like there were some changes. And he was helping me getting up to this point of like putting certain words or saying no to certain ideas. But so I read them, and he looked at me, he's like, that's good. And I did one of those Elaine pushes, like, I'm like, what? Yeah. Yeah. So somewhere along that same, this is like the other part of what cracked it open for me, is I was walking, not with James, just by myself. And I was thinking, what if I don't have both the beginning of the line and on one page and a page turn and getting to the next part? That was always what I had done. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know, I had a thumbnail here.
Yeah.
Anyway, because it seemed like with the congregation, the minister would say one thing, like in every birth, and then page turn, blessed is the wonder, you know?
Right.
So it was locked into my mind for 25 years that that's how it would work.
Yeah.
Like it just, I never thought about it differently.
Yeah.
That's what I was stuck on. Yeah. Because I kept thinking, if you read like in every birth to a child, for instance, or even an adult, especially an adult, actually, because they're not going to look at the pictures very carefully. So
no, kids are very invested in the pictures in a way.
Right. So like, you know, then look at the pictures in every birth, and then you turn the page, and then you get to the end, blessed is the wonder. You've already kind of lost the thread.
Right. Whereas here, you can really see the whole thread together.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was walking and thinking, and I thought, what if it's just on one page, and then I can do all these vignettes, and then I can turn the page and expand it out to.
And this is what's so beautiful is you have these landing pages. It's like hard to get the whole. Yeah. So you've gotten the text, and then you get to land here.
And I just thought, oh my gosh, like then that gives me an opportunity to sort of reflect whatever this line is in a larger scale.
Yeah.
And so on that same walk, I called Alan, and I was like, okay, listen, what if, and I kind of explained that. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so much calmer about this manuscript. And I said, I know, me too. And she's like, I'm always worried about that page turn. I'm like, I know, me too. Like, and it felt like I could start.
Yeah.
I just knew like, oh, that is the form. That's the form I was looking for all these years. And it didn't occur to me. I mean, it just never occurred to me to change that page turn until it did occur to me.
Until it did, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But also,
so that
some piece of your brain that wouldn't hand it over to another illustrator knew that there was something to be solved, which I love, right? Your brain was like, I can solve it. I don't know what it is. It was a page turn, right? It was really a page turn. It was like getting in the way. But it took, 20 years to figure it out, and that's okay. I love that as like an exercise, and I just so everyone can see, because I think that the rhythm of images is so right. So we open with an image, and then I don't want to like do the whole book, but just see that like, and then you get the text all in one spread, and then you really get to interact. And this is what I love is like when you read books with kids, they really do want to like look at all the pictures and tell the story themselves too, right? It really, and then you land on these big, beautiful spreads. I mean, it's just gorgeous. And I just think it invites so much interactivity with kids. Like, as I'm sure like you've had kids and grandkids, like they want to tell their own stories or understand the story in their own words. And I feel like this book invites that and makes it feel really joyful. Yeah. Because like whenever I read with my baby nieces, it's like, well, this is happening here. And I feel like you've given space for that by finding those right few words. Because that was always my question. It's like, how do you tell a story in 8 lines, 7 lines? Like that puts so much pressure on each line, on each word.
I think the idea that I would split those lines and have the wordless spreads made the 8 original lines not really even possible, because of, unless it went to more pages, and then you might need more than 8 lines. I mean, it was just like, and I loved that because as I said, some of the lines felt like they were kind of saying a similar thing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, okay, 7 lines, which is why when I did finally say the lines to James, it was 7 lines, and I had to push him because I had already kind of figured out like that wordless spread thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of started doing thumbnails, which literally like,
Oh, I love this.
This is like
this is so cool. So you like storyboard when you work. You
I
get that.
Always, almost always, except for one time when I didn't do this step with thumbnails. It was with All the World.
Mm-hmm.
I went right to the full size dummy, and I ended up having to go back and do the thumbnails. I always start with like kind of as I tell kids, like it's sort of a map of the whole book, so I can see the whole thing at one time.
Yeah.
In the most broad sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what those little images are. They're just scribbles in some cases.
Right, but you're like the rhythm of the image. You saw the vignettes, like you knew the vignettes had to be on the page in a certain way, or there were a certain number would be better on one page versus another. Yeah.
Right, and then just to so then I go with a little dummy, like which is somewhat loose, and this
gosh, this is like such a cool piece of your process.
And then I get bigger.
Yeah.
So this is, and I'm starting to figure out like the actual, pages, like, and then I get sort of a little bigger to kind of
I love
nail down more.
Yeah.
And then I finally do it full size. Well, this isn't even full size. This is, well, actually, this is the size that I did the paintings, but they were enlarged slightly for the book. So I knew it was going to go up in size a little bit. But by this time, I pretty much know what's on every page. Yeah. And then I start painting. I spend a lot of time in the planning stages doing, well, as you can tell from the whole story I'm telling you about this. But like, so in this case, I have these 4 different dummies of different sizes.
No, I love this. And I love seeing that you still work by hand. Like, are you using pencil? Are you using charcoal? Like, I think everyone is just like leaning in right now because this is so cool. Process feels so mysterious, especially if you're just like, I just do the words part. So the idea of like, how do images get into a book? It's like, please tell me more. I have an art history degree too, so I'm like, show me the sketches, show me everything.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do it all, with pencils and erasers. Yeah. A lot of erasers.
Yeah.
Erasers are a big important part of my process. But
I can see that because there's a lot of, I was like, your lines are so soft. Like the lines are so soft and smooth, and they like feed into the way you use color. So I can see that an eraser would be really important in sketching out, and like what you take away is just as important as like what you put on the page.
Yeah. I think for me, when I start really small, I'm not committing to anything except for, as you said, the rhythm or like the beats or,
Yeah.
And then as it goes up in size, if I start too big, I get too involved in like extraneous detail, and then I can get caught up. And so I just take it slowly. Mm-hmm. And then by the time it's full size and I'm going to be actually painting at that size, then I'm just thinking color and technique. If it is in color, sometimes it's not, but what's the palette, and it sort of like narrows the choices of then what I'm working on. It's just like, how do I execute this particular drawing or spread?
Mm-hmm. You can kind of enjoy the forest, or you can enjoy the trees because you've set up where the forest goes, right? So
exactly.
You don't get lost in the forest and all the trees and go like, wait, was I building a forest here? I was really invested in this color. How do you use a color palette for each of your books? Oh, sorry, if you're going to go off of that.
Only with this book did I do this. So I finally decided on these colors. So the top is like Blessed is the Wonder, and then the yellow is Blessed is Life, and then this is Blessed is the Doing, and then this is Blessed is the Comfort.
Oh my gosh,
Blessed is the Mystery. Blessed is Tears, and then Love. And so I kind of, there were many ways
Yeah.
I kind of tried to narrow it down. But once I had that, it was kind of like it's another like legend and map, and it was just like, well, I'm going to have lots of colors in all these spreads, except the primary color, like the one I'm sort of like the one that's most prominent is going to be
I can
that
pull
one.
it up so people can kind of see.
Yeah. So
just think it's so.
Because I kind of felt like
so everyone can see how that primary color kind of comes into that spread we've been looking at. So you can see, like, yes, there are other colors, but that's what's grounding it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, emotions, you know, it's, we all like, look at turning red, like, you know, there's certain emotions that are just like, there are colors associated with those emotions. And I sometimes feel like emotions can't really be discussed easily, but they can be sort of seen.
Yes, I can understand that. Yeah.
And I think that was my idea with the larger spreads, is like when you're out in the world, especially in nature, the world tends to echo whatever emotional state you might be in, you know? You can find it out there. And I think it's comforting that, you know, it's no longer, you're not the center of the universe. You're part of it. Yeah. And it's holding you. And I wanted those spreads to have that effect if possible, which was like kind of a big goal, you know.
I mean, it is, but I think they do feel both. I think because you have these individual vignettes that feel really personal and a lot of them feel really intimate, which is what's so beautiful about them, is you feel like you're included on an intimate moment with all of these different people, but then you get these big spreads. And so you get that, like, that small intimacy, that sort of like, this is how a feeling is for me. This is how it looks for all sorts of different people, which I love, right? And like the ways in which wonder looks to different people is really different, right? Like, and I love the idea that, like, sometimes it's just, you know, like the one with her cat is so beautiful, or just, right? Like, everyone's wonder looks really different. And then we do that pulling back, and that sense of nature, that sense of like, there's that intimate scene, but like, here we are and pulled back. And I just keep thinking, like, did you use that these transition colors. So also I want everyone to admire this, because we're going from the red clouds to the yellow in terms of palette. This is why I love visual storytelling. And then we land in the yellow visually. So I think you do that like rhythm of like close and big and intimate and identifiable but different, and then sweeping back out, is just such a beautiful visual rhythm of the story. Like, I think we think a lot about the word rhythm, but not always about the visual rhythm and the way they work together. It's just stunning.
Thank you.
And super fun. Yeah.
You know, once I was talking to a friend who's a songwriter about, I'm like, how do you do that? Like, how, like, it was so mystifying to me. And she described like having sort of this visual of a line that became like a melody. And I was like, that is so incredible, because like when I'm working on a book, I think of like those thumbnail sketches as a rhythm section. Yeah. Like, I think of it as,
and they look like musical measures kind of too.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm not a musician.
No.
Like, but I think about it that way. And then, I mean, I've kind of found this in a lot of different conversations or podcasts with various creative people. It's like they talk about their process and it breaks down into other art forms, perhaps.
Yeah.
Like the initial way in, you know? And I think that's fascinating. I mean,
I do too. So, I think it's like that idea of which also applies to your book, but like the universal is specific, and like the more you drill into, I see it in this way to make a story and turn it into music, or I see it in this way to take a story and turn it into this interplay of words and pictures, versus I see it in this way and it's going to be a movie, or see it this way and it's only a book. Like, the more you drill down, the more you realize that we're actually all doing a really similar thing. We just express it in these different lines and these different, the lines of music versus the lines of words versus lines of images, which is always fun, to hear about.
That is a really cool way of thinking about it, what you just said, like that we're all really doing a similar thing, and that's at the core of creativity maybe, and we just then branch out into our various whatever lane we're in maybe. But
and the languages that make sense to our brain, right? Like there's a rhythm of images that make sense to your brain. That someone who like doesn't have a picture in their head and only has words, like that wouldn't be where they go with it, but they can understand it when you break it down.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. I'm just like, I'm like, this is so cool. I can talk about that all day. And I love it. And like, I was also thinking about in terms of art, I think because I just watched the Oscars, but like the idea that it took you, I'm like, you've been writing books, you've had commercial success, and it still took faith and perseverance to get this through. And thinking about those actors that like Kei Kwan, who just like, it just took 20 years. And like, that's really hard to like say to yourself now.
Wasn't that a beautiful theme about the Oscars? Like it ran through the whole, I know. I loved it. Yeah.
Like, great art and great storytelling doesn't have an expiry date. And I think that there should be a relief for any other creatives on the line that like, you can have faith in your stories, and it's okay if it's not working out right now. That doesn't mean never.
Right.
Yeah.
And cool. for me, I mean, it really did require, when I think about like, when I saw my notes from like way back, and when I thought about how I was describing the book to myself, even, it was so not on point. Like I mean, it was like it was sort of externalized. I think by the time I got, going through this pandemic has changed us all. And by the time I was sort of thinking about it again in the end of 2020, I was a very different person than I had been like in the decades before. And I feel like I had matured a great deal, and that also was partly why I was able to sort of look at it differently. I mean, and one of the things that I was thinking about, as we all have been probably thinking about if we're thinking people, is like how so divided everybody has become in our country, and like how like there's no common ground, and we can't understand like what is going on with any, so it's just very
right. It's like a very listening breakdown.
And I mean, this book was for me like trying to figure out like what do we all have in common, like what, when it really comes right down to it, what do we all have in common, and what do we all care about, and no matter who we are, like, and that was sort of like that was kind of where I tried to go in. So when it was like, the form was one thing to unlock, but then it was like when I was actually then finally drawing, which is, it's so crazy to me that it took me so long to actually draw something. And I think that's interesting too, as, for anybody who's an illustrator listening to this, like, or even a writer whose work, you assume one day somebody is going to illustrate. If you're a picture book writer, it's going to be illustrated. The process of doing the pictures isn't just drawing them. Like, it's not just being a wrist and drawing the pictures. It's like how do you get in there to what is the story you're going to tell? Like, how is it resonating with you as the illustrator in order to do that? And it's there are many levels there. I mean, it's something that I've heard like many writers say to me, well, I could never illustrate anything, but it must be just easy for you. And it's like, no. I wouldn't say that.
I took a sketching class as an art historian so I could understand, and never have I appreciated underpainting more than after having to take a drawing class. I remember trying to draw like a tractor that was on campus, and I just almost screamed into the void. And that was just like something right in front of me.
Right.
And, never been more proud too that the instructor was like, "You're really getting this sense of movement in the dust." I was like, "Thank you." It was really hard. And that was also a lot of erasing and smudging and removing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I think,
it's
you're bringing up such a beautiful point that I feel in writing, and I think is very cool to see again that I think of illustrating as so different, but what I'm learning is how similar it is. Like those times when you are not physically writing, you're not putting words on the page, you're not drawing, but you're doing the work of writing, which is always difficult to describe to people because they're like, okay, you're just sitting in a field staring off, like you're going on your little walk, like that's neat that that's your work, but you're like, no, but you're really trying to solve a problem. And there's so much, I think, of creative work and storytelling that is that cognitive part of understanding what you're trying to get on the page before you can even approach it, which is where there's a lot of frustration.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the work is in that. Most of it.
The bulk of the work is, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Which is why if you just have a couple hours to work and your expectation is like, I'm going to sit down and it might not be the case. You might
spend 2 hours really thinking about the problem that's important. Yeah, and that's okay. And I think not beating yourself up, I think, is one of the hardest things to learn, of like, you can approach the work and the problem of the work without getting anything physically on the page, and when you've committed to it, like no one else can see it but you, but that doesn't mean it's not real.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. It is. I think we're the worst usually about that to ourselves.
I would never say to someone else that I have said to myself.
Right.
All I did was sit on a rug and think. And it's like, would you tell your students that? I'm like, I would literally never say that.
Never say that. I know. I mean, the things I would tell my students are just things that I very rarely would tell myself, and that's a problem.
The call's coming from inside the house.
Yeah.
Every time I'm like, I'm not telling you this because I think you're bad. I'm telling you this because I am intimately aware of the mean voices that I speak to myself.
Exactly. So true. I'm trying to be better about that.
Me too. But it takes a lot of patience with yourself, which I feel like is one of the hardest people to have patience with. And it takes a lot of faith in yourself, which is, I think, why I love this book, because so much of this book is about understanding things that are within words and beyond them, and within pictures and beyond them. And I think that ties so well to the story that you're trying to tell, which makes sense that it took a little life wisdom to get it. So much of this book, it sounds like, was an exercise in restraint too, right? Like limiting the color palette, limiting the page turns, limiting the blessings to the right number. Like refining and restraint just always takes time when you're telling a story.
Yeah. And I can't really say this strong enough, but like during the time I was working on this book, like I had lost a lot of confidence that I was going to be able to continue to work in this field, continue to be creative, like continue to be relevant. I mean, I still have a lot of feelings about that. It's been a really difficult time for me. And I felt like a lot of times while I was working on this book, I felt like I had bit off more than I could chew. Like it's like, I don't know that I'm capable of doing the image that I want to do here, and like each spread, I always go in order. So I did the book in order. And each one of those big landscapes, like when I got to the point where it was like I was taking it off my stretch, I always stretch the paper on, and I'm taking the staples off and it's like it's done. And I'd just be like, oh my God, okay, I did that one. Let's see if I can do the next one. And I'm not kidding. I am not joking. I really didn't.
No, I don't think you're kidding. I'm laughing because my last book was like this. I was like, I have never hated or loved a book more. This is the most painful thing.
Yeah. And yeah, so when, I mean, we always feel, I think, about our own work, like, oh, I wish it, maybe if I could have done this or that better. But like, I mean, I definitely always finally get to the end of a book feeling like that was the best I could do. Like that's the feeling I want to have. I need to have. If I don't have that feeling, then that would be terrible.
You left it all out there. I would say, like, you left it all in the mount. You left it all in the field. You put it all out. Like, it's okay if someone else doesn't like it, because I know I gave 110%. Like that. You have to have that feeling in yourself, because you know the rest of it's out of your hands.
Yeah. And it felt like I accomplished something, like when that was over, and then I love the period of time between when you have the book at the publishing house, you're done, and before it's out. Like I love that time. It's like such a quiet-ish moment of privacy, like where you don't know how the book is going to be received. You don't know much about, but you did this thing, and now you wait and see. And
because it's still yours, but it's finished. Like that phase of it's still mine. It doesn't belong to really anyone else, but I know I did it. Yeah, I can see that. I love that you're like a quiet. Yeah, it is like a quiet delight.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely like try very hard to kind of enjoy that period, because I do think it's yours. I mean, it's the one, especially if you have little kids around, or you're trying your job that you also, you're always trying to fit in all these little things of other people's needs, and as you're working on it. So like your time isn't quite all yours.
No.
And then when the book is out, and it's sort of like, then you see, there are reviews, and then you talk about it, and then, it's sort of out there, people are responding to it, and sometimes maybe in ways that you didn't anticipate. And it's like, that's interesting.
Often it was sometimes delightful, but you're like, I never
that's interesting. But in that period of time in between, it's just yours. It's like it's like something, in your pocket. You can just sort of reflect on it. Yeah.
It's a nice secret between you and you that you don't get to keep forever. But I think that's why it is special, because you're like, this will pass, and I know the date exactly when the lid pops off. But right now, it's mine, and no one can take that feeling.
Yeah.
Which I think is so important, and that's such a beautiful piece of wisdom to give anyone else creating out there, that like, enjoying those moments of celebration that are quiet and yours are just as important, if not more so, than like the big moments that everyone sees. All right, we have about 10 minutes left. I've seen some questions in the chat, and there's a question box that's in the, you have to exit and come back if you want to use it, but it's in the Instagram story, so you can drop a question that way. Do you mind if we start popping into some of these? Okay,
no, you
most of them are
can do that. I'm going to just sit here and wait, because otherwise I might disappear.
All right, here is one, which is, someone would like to illustrate a children's book. Where can they find the right resources to publish their work? Which I think a lot of that is like, how do you kind of get started illustrating versus writing? Because I have a sense of like how you start as writing.
Well, the SCBWI is the best place to start, and here we are. So that's a really good. You're already here. It's. I think I wouldn't have become published without the SCBWI, and I started to attend regional conferences before anything, I'm in LA, so the national conference was in LA. And actually, when I started, you could kind of attend one day, not the, you didn't have to attend the whole conference,
Yeah.
which was really helpful for me because I couldn't have afforded to come to a whole conference at that time. And but I would just listen to people talk about publishing, and then I started to do the regional things, and then it's smaller group, it's not as intimidating. I would meet people, and at the same time I was sending my work out, and I realized going to the regional conferences that like the people who I had sent to remembered the pieces I sent. So I felt as if like they had actually seen, you know, it wasn't like I was sending it into a void.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, oh, that's encouraging. And
yeah.
So I think that's really the best.
You felt like there were people invested in your career and in you getting better as an artist rather than just people paying lip service to that idea.
And at first, you know, I was getting obviously rejections. I have a whole, I could bring them out and show you. It's like a whole file.
Mine are all in email format. Yeah.
Yeah, mine are all like when the fax machine was. But
the fax machine, that's the plot point in the firm.
But I didn't realize until later how supportive a lot of the rejections were. Like so in the beginning,
it's so
right. It was like, oh,
when someone tells you the rejection is supportive, like listen to that person because your brain is only like they didn't want it.
Right, exactly. So you know, and it's just being tenacious and staying with what it is you want to do. There were a lot of opportunities I had early on to illustrate books that weren't the kind of books that I eventually wanted to do. And so I sort of did a split. I did commercial work and educational work, textbooks.
Okay.
And then I waited to get the kind of book that it was that I really wanted to do. And I didn't mix in there. Like it was like two tracks because there's certain kind of work that you can do that you can kind of use to keep yourself afloat that is not going to sort of get you published, let's say, but it will pay your bills.
Right.
And so that's what I did for like quite a while I waited to finally get my first book published.
It to be under your name in the way that you felt good about. Then you had these educational illustrations that people did value and spend money on, but weren't necessarily contributing or taking away from the name you wanted to build as a storyteller and as an artist and an illustrator.
And there's really no crossover. You can do textbooks as an illustrator and no one's gonna, the good news is no one's gonna look at those and think, like, I'm going to publish this person, or I'm not going to publish this person.
Body looks like that because I don't know that you could write a book about dogs. That's what your mitochondria is. Okay.
Right. So you can sort of find your way by, you know, just, and I think that's what's good about SCBWI, because you can go meet people and then you have a name and then they know you, maybe they'll remember you, and, you know, eventually it's not that big of a pool of people out there who are in the children's book business, you know?
Yes. No, it is a smaller community than you might think. Right. And the thing that I always find nice about SCBWI and so many, just especially here in LA, like the number of children's book writers and authors and illustrators is like, we really are singing like we're all in this together from High School Musical. Like I feel like there is this sense of community and helping each other out that isn't necessarily there in other places, but I think that is definitely here and definitely in SCBWI and definitely just in the children's book community, which is so lovely.
I agree.
Okay, I have another question in here that I'm going to look at, but while we're looking at it, there was a request to see your very cool thumbnails again, if you don't mind showing them when I was in the chat. Oh, okay.
Can you see?
Yeah. Those are so great. I love that you storyboard. Okay, these are good. It says, and this one's related, your process is very thorough. How long does it take you to illustrate a book from start to finish? And I think you can probably think about that in terms of like, obviously this book took 20 years from like idea to publication, right. But I think maybe from like when you start storyboarding to when it's a finished, those drawings come up, the staples come up, right. Done. How long is that process for you?
It's the average time is a year. It takes me probably about 6 months of planning to get to the place where I'm actually doing the finishes, and about 6 months to do the finishes. I've certainly done books in like less time, but it would be more like 9 months, and like more time, which would be more like 18 months. So that's the typical
about a year.
About a year, yeah.
And then there's another question, which is, you spoke about staying relevant. What advice do you have for published authors and illustrators who worry about losing momentum? And thank you for your time. That's so sweet.
That is so sweet. Yeah. Advice. That's funny because I'm the last person that probably should be giving advice right now.
Well, I think you should be kinder to yourself.
Okay.
I think you've been kinder. Like you've had a longer career and you've kept going and you've managed to keep writing and publishing books, which is a way of staying relevant. So I think you should give yourself credit for that one.
I mean, over the years, I've done a lot of things that have helped me continue to work. And one is teaching. Right now, I'm not actively teaching, but I have taught most of my career. And that's been really helpful to me to just sort of, when you articulate things that, you know, as a teacher, it kind of puts, it defines certain things that are more amorphous to you as you're working on your own work. And it's like, it's a wonderful back and forth, I think. I love that. And I've been really lucky to have like a lot of my students that I have passed through my class, you know, do their own books, and it's just the best feeling. So teaching is a big part of it, but really it's like living. I mean, I feel like whether I've been, you know, when I had little kids, it turned out like the books that generated were very specific to sort of the emotions that generated, which has gone through my whole life, really. It's like whatever I'm emotionally like consumed by is what I end up putting into the books that I'm doing, which, you know, always surprises me because it feels very like two different things when you're actually living your day, but it's not. And I think having the faith in like that you're just sort of, by living, you're sort of generating like the fuel is there for you to put into your work. It's just like accessing it and trusting it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, no, it is staying really present in your life, and committing to that is what fuels your art and fuels good art and enables you to make the next creative thing. One of
the experiences I had, which was really relevant to me, is the Nickel, which is it's a museum of children's book art in Abilene, Texas. Nickel is like the National Illustrator. I can't think of what it stands for.
I can look it up while you're doing it.
Yeah. Right. Okay. That'd be great. They did a retrospective of my work, and it was really wonderful. And I went there, and after like the show, I was sitting in the area, the gallery, and I could see, we were talking to some of the people that were like on the board, and everybody was sort of gone. It was like late in the evening. And I was looking at all the work that was up on the wall, and it was like all these eras of my life. And I could remember painting them and like what was happening with like the memories of like the kids at the ages they were when like I was doing that work. It was coming back to me. And it was like, wow, like this is, it was really a moment for me, like that I took in, because I hadn't ever done that. I had never spread out my work.
Yeah, you never looked at it and you're like, here's some of your first illustrations, here's some of the middle, here's some of the last, like, and then you're like, art is autobiography, even when it's, you know, about, you know, being a silly eater.
Right. And I think it meant something to me that as I sat there and thought about that, like I've not really forgotten that feeling, like, oh, you know,
Really special. Yeah,
yeah.
no, that is really special. And just so everyone knows, it's the National Center for Children's Illustrated Literature, which I don't know how,
Thank you.
there's like 3 C's in there.
I knew there were a bunch, I guess. Yeah, thank you for doing that. Yeah.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and all of your wisdom. It was so beautiful to listen to you. For everyone else, we've been talking with Marla Frazee. Did I get that right that time?
Yes, you did.
Yes, Marla Frazee. In Every Life. It is such a beautiful, lyrical, spiritual, philosophical, and just like, look at this delightful back image, by the way. Like, how joyful is that? Like, just what a moment. Definitely check it out. Thank you so much for your questions, and thank you for your time, and I will see you on the other side of the internet.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.